welcome to Inspiration Whispers, where in a world where purpose and inspiration is so needed, we find it to help you change your life. I want to really say thank you and welcome Tim Hetzner today. Man, Tim, you do a really interesting thing. You're part of the Lutheran charity and Lutheran Church charity, sorry. And well, I want the audience to hear it from you, what you do. It's so inspirational. So please go for it. Tell me how you got into this and what you do.
To your topic, one of the things I think that helped shape me, inspire me, and so forth was actually my upbringing on a farm in Frankenmuth, Michigan, on a dairy farm, and working on that and being all part of a farming community and a community where people helped each other and did things. And I also, but it wasn't an all German, all white community. I happened to live on that border where I went to a high school that actually whites were a minority. And now this is way back at the time where, you know, all the racial stuff was not really addressed. And so I from high school on, I went to a one-room schoolhouse for the first 5 years, which was on my dad's farm. But in high school, I went to a high school that was pretty much split one-third with Black and then Hispanic. And some of us farm kids. So it was an interesting mix. I played sports, but also learned an awful lot about that, which was good to have learned, which helped, was another piece of shaping who I was. But I went into what was going to be counseling, and God directed me into actually parish ministry as director of discipleship. And my passion has always been to help people discover who they are and what God has already planned for them, and how do they engage that, and how do they make a difference with the people around them, but also out into a world that's hurting. How do you make a difference in that? And so in my parish ministry days, the challenge was always to get people outside the walls of a church. And in fact, to be very honest, one of the most frustrating things in parish ministry, which I loved, was getting people outside the walls of the church, and not to just be preaching to the choir, or to just, you know, put on their little church hats and walk into the building on Sundays, and then, you know, once you get out in the parking lot and drive away, then you live another life. To me, that's not what it's about. It is certainly not what brings fulfillment to someone. And fulfillment, I learned very easily, was not how much money you make, because I know a lot of wealthy people. I know a lot of filthy wealthy people. I know a lot of filthy people too. And wealth isn't what brings them contentment or purpose. It drives them to make more money sometimes, but it doesn't bring them into. In fact, some of the happiest people that I know that one would say are wealthy are those that don't show it at all. They live very simple, humble lives and quietly help people. They're the ones that don't have their names on the sides of buildings, and they're not, you know, establishing foundations with their names on it and all that. I tend to try to stay away from people like that. It's
so that beautiful inspiration that you're looking to inspire, that fulfillment beyond the walls of the church. And you know, I read that you did this you got asked by FEMA after Hurricane Katrina, and you were asked to help people to save animals and pets, which you know, I didn't even know that FEMA couldn't do that, and that you were that you were asked to go and do that. Can you tell a little bit about that story and what it brought and reaching out beyond the walls of the church?
Well, when I came to Lutheran Church Charities, which was myself and a half-time person, my predecessor was actually in jail. So, and growing it, I believe that, you can do things two ways. You can either develop a plan, and I was big into this 1, 2, 3, 5-year plans, and you execute them, you think them all through and all that. And then I realized that everything that I planned didn't work very long. It just didn't. It fell apart. When things were thrown into my face and I had to make a quick decision, do I respond or not? Those were the things that lasted. And they were all things that, of course, I believed as a Christian that were God-given and God-directed. And I realized that if you had everything that you do figured out before you did it, you're worthless because you'll never do it. And this was a case. We were doing disaster response down in, this was Katrina. We were operating in a little town right on the border of New Orleans called Metry. And we brought in 23 people that all were medical certified and a semi of medical supplies to set up triage to help people. We were in closer than Red Cross was. And we were operating out of a church. And that was going fine. And then FEMA asked us, they were doing search and rescue, if we would do search and rescue people and their pets, because they wouldn't leave their pets. They'd rather die with their cat or dog in their hands than to actually leave a dangerous situation. So we had never done it. But, and I got to confess to you, it wasn't what motivated me wasn't, we got to save all these dogs and cats. What motivated me was, we got to get these people out of there. And if it means bringing them with their pets, let's bring them with their pets. Yeah. And so I had to buy boats and all this kind of stuff, all within like 3 or 4 hours, and then get it down there and start going out and start getting people. And I remember trying to get volunteers because there's dead bodies floating. And all I could think of, I advertised for deer hunters, only I didn't spell it like the animal, it's DEAR. Yeah. Because I knew that if you could field dress a deer, you probably could stomach dead bodies floating around.
Right.
And you could. So anyway, I put them down and I had volunteers, some who happened to be hand-waving, tongue-speaking charismatics, going with people, a few pastors that were black on white. Okay, so they were very conservative. And I thought, oh my God, this is another disaster that's going to take place. But you know what? As I have found out, when there is a crisis or there a need, it pulls people together to work together that normally would never do that. And that's still the case. And so with any crisis, any disaster, I kind of look at it, and not that I like crises or disasters, but the truth of the matter is it pulls people together. It also then separates the true compassionate people from the people who are fake. I mean, it does a separation. It also, crisis and disasters can bring out the worst in people too. But I love how it brings together the best. And so these Pentecostal, tongue-speaking, hand-waving Pentecostals and our conservative, they work together, they accomplish, and they're still friends. And I think, the Pentecostals taught these Lutheran pastors how to pray. And the Lutheran pastors taught the Pentecostals how to drink beer. So, I mean, it worked out. It worked out great.
Beautiful. So
people were helped.
Yes. So, but there was something also gained that you really did gain from this as well. is this attachment with people and their animals, and
Yes.
you took that to the next level, which is, this the crisis realization that people can in crisis find inspiration and use that to bond, to create, to be connected and live in that fulfillment, but also the animals. Could you explain a little more about that?
Well, growing up on a farm, we had cows and we had chickens, and we also always had a dog. They were border cows. So I always saw dogs and all that, and cats that we had. They served a purpose on a farm. The dog, the border collie, would get the cows, gather the cows, and the cats would get rats and all that kind of stuff. They had purposes of it. So when I saw, though, that people were willing to die because of their dog or cat, they weren't going to part. I thought, well, it worked for them. Now, I wish I could say to you that at that time I had this great idea. Let's start a national canine comfort dog ministry. Now, God was telling me that, but I wasn't listening. I told you I was German, so it means I'm hard-headed. In fact,
Yeah.
where I come from,
Junk. Yeah.
Yeah. So where I come from, they bury Germans with their head above the ground because it lasts longer than a tombstone. So I happen to have some disaster response volunteers that had golden retrievers. And so at the next disaster, I said, bring them out and just bring them into the room where we're meeting with people to kind of assess their needs and how we're going to help them. And I saw that when people petted these golden retrievers, that they relaxed. And it was easier for us to kind of help them and help assess what their needs were. And a lot of times the needs weren't physical. They were emotional.
Yeah.
They needed somebody to listen. They needed somebody to say, we're going to be there with you. They didn't need somebody to say, it's going to be all okay. They needed somebody to say, we're going to stand with you. So disaster after disaster, that's what we did. Then we had the shooting at Northern Illinois University, DeKalb, where the pastor was in lockdown. He goes, Hetzner, you got those dogs? Well, we didn't own any dogs at that time, and I had no plans to. But I pulled together every four-legged blonde I could, and we brought them out to that campus. And I'll never forget it. They had a tent set up with counselors, and the kids were all supposed to be in there. And we bring the dogs out, and guess what happened with all the kids? They came out to the dogs.
Yeah.
And then I saw the counselors coming out after me, and I thought, okay, I'm in trouble because I'm stealing their business. And they just stood there with me and they said, this works. These kids are talking. And I go, okay. Now, still no idea. Hey, let's start a dog ministry. May of that year, the students petitioned the administration for LCC to bring in the dogs. I still don't have any dogs. I don't own any dogs. But I pulled them together. We went out, and that's when God hit me hard and said, don't wait for a crisis or disaster. Place dogs in churches, schools, or universities to help you.
Wow.
So,
and so if you will, God was whispering, and finally yelled at you and said, come on, I can't whisper anymore.
well, I don't think from the whisper, it really went to a plank hitting you on the side of the head, which God has to do sometimes to wake you up, particularly if you're German, to hit you and say, how long do you want to fight this? Now, I can give you spiritual examples of that in Abraham and Isaac and all that kind of, but that's how God works. And that's what it takes a lot of times with people. But the key out of all this, that this forced me to ask the question, why does it work so well with a dog where humans fail?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, okay, these dogs don't talk. They bark, but our dogs don't bark. We train them not to bark. They show unconditional love. And it's obvious because they got tails that wag. You know, humans don't have little tails that wag, so we got to show it in other ways. We have arms. They're confidential. They're non-judgmental. They don't take notes. And they help people process whatever's going on inside. Now, one other thing I noticed about dogs, and this I share with people all the time. Dogs had at least the dogs that we use, golden retrievers, but it's not just dogs, have this ability to be able to spot someone who's hurting across the room. And they'll nudge you to go over to them. Of course, when we're out, our dogs are always on leash and we get training. And they're never wrong. Even when everybody around that person doesn't recognize that they're hurting, the dogs do. And it intrigued me because I wondered, what is it that they have that they can do this? And I thought initially it was smell. That there must be smell when people are more stressed or hurting. They must give off some odor that dogs get, because dogs are used for search and rescue, you know, to sniff out.
All the time, smell hormones off our body. Yeah, all of those, understandably.
But I was wrong. I was wrong. I researched and I came across something, and this started, I do biblical study tours to the Middle East. So I know the Middle East, Israel, and Jordan better than I do Chicago. And one of the stories in Scripture has to do with a lady who poured out her tears in Jesus's feet, and she had a tear cup. In fact, I have one here if you want to see a picture of one. I took some courses from a rabbi at Spartus University when I was getting my degree in Jewish studies. And a close family friend of his died while I was in the course. Every day, 10 men met with him early in the morning for the sole purpose to make him cry. As I looked at this and I started checking into tears, I found out that grief tears contain an enzyme that has a depressant. Now, University of Madison did research on it. At the same time, a university in Russia did research. Concluded the same thing. Grief tears have an enzyme that's a depressant. So when you cry in grief, no matter what that grief is, it's the way of the body healing itself. Or I see it as a way of God creating us with a mechanism to heal ourselves. In fact, they concluded that one of the reasons women live longer than men is because men tend to bury their grief, which is not healthy.
We tend to let it out. Yeah.
Yes. But how many times do we tell somebody, don't cry, you're going to be okay, when we should cry with them?
Right. Yeah. But if you relate this to the Bible, right? In all great times, water was one of the ways that we cleanse the earth. We relieve the earth. And I always thought of it as very similar. The crying is our way of cleansing our bodies and of the if you will, the toxins of some sort, the relief that we need. Yep. So beautiful. So the dogs smell these.
Let me finish this. How is it that dogs could spot somebody?
Yeah.
That's where I was started with. Eyes. Eyes do not lie. You know that? Faces can. We can put on a face. We can say to someone, hey, how are you doing? They can smile and say they're fine, but they're not. Eyes don't lie. Talk to anyone that's involved in law enforcement. Eyes cannot lie. And so dogs have an incredible sight, of good sight. In fact, dogs are one of the few animals that will look people in the eyes.
Right.
They can spot across the room by looking at the eyes if somebody's hurting.
Wow.
So in not only in training dogs, in fact, training dogs is the easy part. It's humans. Training
the humans.
Training humans to shut up, listen, look people in the eye and
Mm,
touch,
in touch.
and let people talk. And don't be afraid of silence. A classic example that I share was a little boy at Sandy Hook who, we were called out with our dogs when that took place out there. 4 days later, we were at a community center with our dogs. We were invited in with the dogs. People were coming to pet the dogs. And I saw this boy. I had an old dog at the time. His name was Howie. And Howie was, he was more of a comfort rug than he just laid out. Big old Howie. And I saw this husband and wife coming out with their little son. And the son was walking very slow. And the parents, kind of walking with him. And the parents brought him out with the hopes that maybe he'd pet one of the dogs. He did not talk for 4 days. They had taken him to a psychologist. They'd taken him to anyone, anything. No words, 4 days. A signal to the parents to get away from him. And so he just stood there. Now, Howie looks at him, lifts his head up, looks at him, gets up, comes over to him, leans into him, and they both go down on the ground.
Oh.
This boy lays on top of him.
Oh.
Lays on top of him, and the boy just lays there. And Howie just lets him lay there, kind of looks at him. About 2 minutes of this, the little boy lifts up Howie's ear and tells Howie everything that happened in that classroom that day of the shooting, where he lost classmates. He was in that room. It took a dog to listen when they had taken him to counselors and psychologists. That is the magic. Now, I happen to believe that God gave us animals, all kinds, to teach us what to be.
Yeah. And to be.
We pay attention. What to be.
So, Tim, we have to wrap up. We're running out of time, but thank you for that amazing, all the stories. I still have tears coming in my eyes. That is so touching. So just one last question before we wrap up here. The purpose and the mission of the Lutheran Church Charities, what is that, and where are you going with that inspiration that you bring forward?
It's not a program. It's not about dogs. It's about mercy. It's about compassion. It's about presence. Our presence with somebody. And of course, the presence of God. To be with people. To touch. Help people, whatever it is they're going through. And you know what? Everybody is going through some type of crisis. Personal, or surrounded, or all of it. And everybody needs somebody to listen and to look in their eyes and to care. And we pray with people, we touch with people. And it's that healing power of mercy, compassion, no judgmental, accept people who they are, where they are. That's a problem I have with Christians. We tend to want to, we're called by God to catch fish. Many Christians want to clean their fish before they even catch them. And we're not called to clean fish. We're called to catch fish. We're not called to change people. That's good. We're called to be present, to listen, and show love.
Wow.
And boy, our world needs it.
Right now.
Because crisis is not the weather. Yep. It's not the earthquake, which I'm dealing with at Haiti.
Yes.
It is lack of compassion that people have for one another.
It's such a fabulous, Tim, and such an important message. So I just want to thank you again today. What you brought, what you've done, the ministry and as a whole, and then again, what you're offering with the animals, the dogs, it's just phenomenal. And you're there. I know, obviously, you just said you're out there. You're probably going to go to Haiti and help out. It's so beautiful. And I want to thank you so much for giving that to the world. And I do find what you're doing very inspirational and bringing inspiration to others. So
it's God who does it. He works in spite of me if I can get out of the way and allow him to work. and I say this seriously. Too many times people get in the way with their own agendas, with their own stuff. And that's easy to have happen. You got to get out of the way and let God direct and be faithful to what he directs. And he always works through people. It's never programs.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for today. And my audience, how can my audience reach out to you? How could they touch base with you?
First of all, reach out to somebody close to them and be compassionate. They could go to our website, LutheranChurchCharities.org, and they can see the various things we do. They can get our weekly newsletter by email. That's free. But most important, there is somebody in their life, if not more than one, that they can reach out to just listen and be present and develop a loving relationship, not a quick relationship. And don't try to change them. Just be there. Let God do his work.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tim.
God bless you.
Take care. Welcome again, and thank you for watching Inspiration Whispers. We're in a world where inspiration and purpose is so needed. We find it to help you change your life. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.